Hello and welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen.
Welcome to episode 11 with special guest Anna Baltzer. You can listen to our live broadcasts and chat along with us over at mixlr.com/Shadow Citizen. We are also simulcast on radioconfluence.com, and from there you can take us with you on TuneIn and Zeno Live. For a schedule of upcoming guests and past archives, please check out our own site at shadowcitizen.online. And now we have cool merchandise. We have coffee cups and T-shirts, and we even have little onesies for your babies or things for your dog. So anyway, it's pretty cool. We got people sending in pictures, and we really appreciate it a whole lot. My name is Rob O'Sell, and my co-host is
Rachel L. McIntosh. And today, I'm really, really happy to have Anna with us. She is a Jewish American woman, and she spent time in Palestine, and it really affected her to the fact that she now is making a full-time career out of being an activist. She wants to get people to understand what is happening in Palestine and what it means for Americans, because we are getting lots of information through sources that may be not. They're filtering the sources of information that get to us, so we only get a certain picture of what's going on. So I'm really, really excited to have Anna Baltzer with us. She has a book called Witness in Palestine, a Jewish American Woman in the Occupied Territories. And I highly recommend you go to her website, www.annainthemiddleeast.com. She also has a DVD, and she has podcasts. She has all different things. And we are thrilled to have her with us today. Anna, say hello to everybody. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Now, we wanted to talk to you specifically because people are getting filtered information through our mainstream media here in the United States about what it means to be a Palestinian and what it means to be an Israeli. Could you talk to us a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. So when I was, I guess it's about 15 years ago now, I had graduated college and I went to Turkey on a Fulbright scholarship and traveled through the Middle East and Iran and Syria and Lebanon. And along my way, met, as far as I knew at least, for the first time, Palestinian refugees. And it was through my friendships with the families that I met that I started to hear for the first time in my life a very different narrative and story about what was happening in Israel-Palestine from anything that I had ever heard or learned growing up as a Jewish American. And my first reaction was actually disbelief. I thought that this was propaganda and lies. But it drew me to actually go and want to see for myself what was happening on the ground. And what I saw really transformed my life. And what I saw really broke down a lot of the different categories that I think we often tend to get confused, in large part because of that distortion in the mainstream media here in this country. And so one of the distinctions I like to make is between what it means to be Jewish, Israeli, and Zionist. A lot of times people get these things confused, but they're actually separate categories. Jewish people are people of the Jewish faith or culture, like myself, lineage. My mother's Jewish, her mother's Jewish, etc. And that's different from what it means to be Israeli. Israeli is a citizenship. Israelis are citizens of the state of Israel. And that's different from what it means to be a Zionist. And Zionism is a political ideology based on creating and preserving a Jewish state in historic Palestine, often regardless of what the consequences are for the indigenous population. And those are different categories, Jewish, Israeli, Zionist. Sometimes they overlap in the same person, but they're not the same thing. There are Jews who aren't Israeli, like myself. I'm American. There are Israelis who aren't Jewish. 20% of people with Israeli citizenship are actually Palestinians. There are Jews who are anti-Zionist, like myself, people who believe that this land should be for anyone whose families have been there for generations, and that it shouldn't only be preserved for and it should only be the Jewish people who are who have rights there. And then there are Zionists who aren't Jewish, for example, Christian Zionists, people who talk about the coming of the Armageddon and actually have no intention of protecting Jews at all, but do want to support Israel. And we see actually more and more of that in the Trump era. We see the alignment between staunch support for the Israeli state and anti-Semitism. So we're actually seeing this play out before our eyes, and there can be no more claim that these are the same things. And we need to be careful in our communication to keep these things separate. In fact, to sort of claim that support for Israel and support for what Israel's doing to Palestinians, which involves horrors and war crimes and the denial of basic human rights, that those things should have anything to do with Judaism is actually a very offensive parallel to make.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed about your DVD is you don't concentrate on the wars or the war crimes or the atrocities. You mainly just kind of concentrate on just the inconvenience of all the checkpoints, of being walled off in every direction. And of course, Trump wants to build a wall here, and I'm totally opposed to it. But your just appeal to compassion and empathy for the Palestinian people who had lived there and sometimes can't even get to their own land that has been in their family for generations. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So I talk about Jews and Israelis and Zionists, but of course Palestinians are the indigenous population to this land. And given the horrors of European anti-Semitism, there was a drive to create a Jewish state, and there was a desire to do so in what was at the time Palestine, historic Palestine. The trouble was that you were trying to create a Jewish state in an area where the majority of the population simply was not Jewish. Palestinians, there were some Palestinian Jews, but most of them were Palestinian Muslims or Palestinian Christians or others. And so in order to create a Jewish state, it required actually the violent massacre and exile of the majority of Palestinians from their homes and lands in what became known to Israelis as the Israeli War of Independence and Israel's creation in 1948, but known to Palestinians as al-Nakba, which means the catastrophe, in which the majority of Palestinians were driven from their homes and lands and forced into exile or to live in refugee camps or into ghettos. And that was in 1948, but what we see ever since then, and we're coming on actually the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Nakba this coming November, is really the continuation of that process. And what that looks like on a daily basis are these sort of, if you can call them microaggressions, I mean, they're big things, but basic ways to create life, to make life so unlivable for the Palestinian people that they would perhaps choose to leave if they even have that option, or to repress them into submission. Not something unique to Israel, but it's certainly what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. In 1967, Israel, which had occupied 78% of historic Palestine when it created itself, in 1967, so 50 years ago this year, Israel occupied all remaining Palestinian lands, and that as part of that military occupation is a whole intricate system of what we call Israeli apartheid. Israel is an apartheid state. It fits the UN definition of apartheid. And what that can look like is, for example, checkpoints all over the West Bank, where Palestinians who wish to go from their village, let's say, to their university in the closest nearby city, there's the checkpoint that they have to pass through, that they have to wait at for hours and hours. Students humiliated at these checkpoints, often unable to even reach their schools. People trying to hold down a job, it's impossible. People trying to go to the hospital, women who are in labor being forced to give birth at checkpoints. I mean, something as something like a checkpoint, and we know that people are terrorized by these racist checkpoint institutions, not just in Palestine, but in places like the U.S., where we see ICE cracking down on immigrants and the way that that people are really dehumanized by these racist policies of racial profiling, where in some people have some rights and others have others. So, another parallel that you bring up is the wall. Trump, when asked about his desire to not just build a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, because there already is one, but to expand it and to make it even more treacherous, actually cited Israel as justification. Well, look at Israel. Israel has a wall. And actually, Israel's wall is a monstrosity. It's twice the size of the Berlin Wall. In urban areas, it's concrete that high. And it's not even built between Palestinians and Israelis. Not that that would be a great solution, but it's actually built between Palestinians and each other, and their lands, and their communities, their families, their schools, their hospitals, their jobs, but most of all their land. It's a land grab, a way to separate Palestinian farmers from olive groves that are then annexed by Israel. And we can really trace back all of the different policies of occupation that Israel tends to present as security measures, back to this question of Israel getting more land for the Jewish state with fewer people on it, or forcing Palestinians off of it. There's something called Israeli settlements, whereby Jewish Israelis basically can go and occupy a piece of Palestinian land, maybe even a Palestinian's home, and maintain their presence there. Eventually, the Israeli government, might surround it with a security fence, bring in soldiers to protect it, and basically, one by one, these grow into colonies, into settlements built on Palestinian land, whereby Palestinians lose even more of their land, and Jewish Israelis gain control. And these settlements are only for Jews. Palestinians can't live inside them, even though they're built on Palestinian land. So we see these really racist practices that are not unlike, let's say, our history of colonization on this land, on Turtle Island. And we see it carried out today in Palestine with full U.S. support. It is the U.S. that provides the weapons, the diplomatic support, the political support, and all of the backing for Israel to carry out these monstrous, colossal injustices against the Palestinian people. And oftentimes we have no idea. And it's really time that we get that information. There are many ways of now knowing about what's happening, and that we fight it, just as we are fighting other racist U.S.-backed policies.
You are such a good speaker. Look at that. How much you jammed into those few minutes. Good for you. That was awesome. Now listen to me. I watched the DVD last night, and I was just blown away that the two road systems, that was killing me. They have the Israeli road system, and then you have the Palestinian road system. So if you're a Palestinian, you have to drive on their roads. And if you're Israeli, even if you're driving through Palestine to the settlement, you're on Israeli roads. And the Palestinians can't drive on it.
I mean, Israel has a very sophisticated apartheid system. And in fact, it's not even as simple as Israelis versus Palestinians, but Palestinians themselves have a hierarchy of, if you have this kind of ID card, you can be on these roads. If you have that kind of ID card, you can vote. If you have that kind, you cannot vote. If you have, it is really an intricate apartheid system that is fully grounded in dividing the Palestinians from one another and in dominating them. And there is, it's good that you bring up this question of the different identities, because Palestinians are not only those who live in the West Bank and Gaza under military occupation that I began to describe. I didn't even get to Gaza, which is under a brutal, suffocating, deadly siege, and has been for, I believe, I think almost 10 years coming up. But there's also Palestinians living inside Israel, and those are the Palestinians who remained after Israel's Nakba catastrophe, exile of most Palestinians. And they themselves can, for example, vote. They're citizens of Israel, but within a very limited framework, because Israel is not the state of its citizens. Israel is the state of a whole bunch of people who are not its citizens, like myself. It's supposedly my state, even though I live here in the US, just because I'm Jewish, and not the state of a bunch of people who are citizens, like Palestinian citizens of Israel who are not Jewish. And Palestinians inside Israel have more than 50 apartheid laws that discriminate against them simply because of their religion. Not only that, but of course, there's the majority of Palestinians who don't even live inside historic Palestine anymore because they are in exile, because they were made refugees involuntarily by Israel. And when we talk about working for justice for Palestinians, we have to keep, we have to really look at the full breadth of rights being denied to Palestinians, and really to center the voices of Palestinians themselves, who have been talking about these things for decades, even though many of us were not listening.
Can I ask you a question? You just said something. You said Israel is your state, even though you're an American. Can you kind of clarify that? Because I know that my mother constantly my mother and a bunch of people are constantly confused by people who say things like that.
Well, I didn't mean to say that I feel like Israel's my state.
No, but I mean,
really, but yeah. So
how does that technically work?
Part of Israel's propaganda machine is to claim that it represents the Jewish people.
Right.
So it claims that it is the nation of the Jewish people, that everything it does is to protect the Jewish people. And this is problematic on so many levels. One is the direct impact it has on non-Jews under Israel's control. The majority of the people under Israel's control are not Jewish, and yet Israel is very explicitly dedicated only to the Jewish people. And this is not even to get into the fact that among Jews, Israel is a very white, supremacist, racist state wherein Jews of color are systematically targeted as well. But I couldn't speak as an expert on that in any way. But it is extremely important in understanding Israel and Zionism as a white supremacist regime. But Israel's claim to represent Jews is also a way to really silence legitimate dissent. If you claim that you represent the Jewish people, then as soon as we criticize you, then is that criticizing Jews?
Yeah,
right.
You're an anti-Semite.
So it serves to really muzzle legitimate, obvious, really, dissent and criticism against Israel's anti-democratic and oppressive racist policies. So it's really part of this more nefarious way of silencing people, in addition to the obvious political issues with it.
One of the things that Israel does is, it promotes its tourism as, being the place for the birthplace of Christ. And so one of the things they do that you show in the video also is that the wall is pretty much disguised. So it's kind of landscaped, and it doesn't really look very daunting on the Israel side. But when you're on the Palestinian side of the wall, it is just this huge monolith type structure that, is really intimidating. So I know we want to get into some of the local stuff too, and our time is just going by way too fast. Now, I remember seeing about how the Palestinians were actually tweeting to the protesters during the Ferguson protest, and like how to deal with the tear gas, because the tactics and the equipment that they were using is the same equipment that they were using in Israel, and got transported to Ferguson. Is that true, or can you speak on that at all?
So yeah, the same company that produced the tear gas, actually based in Pennsylvania, that's been used to target Palestinians resisting Israeli apartheid, is used against communities in this country, especially communities of color that are likewise targeted by state violence and militarized police. I spoke a lot about the injustices of Israeli oppression of the Palestinian people, but I didn't speak enough about Palestinian resistance, and that it has been central for as long as Zionist oppression has existed, and Palestinians have been resisting in creative, beautiful, interesting, effective ways for for more than 100 years. And a lot of those forms of resistance are actually things that we can learn from here in this country, in particular in the Trump era. So, for example, there's a long history of strikes and of course that exists also in this country, of protests. How do we deal with protests? How do we deal with things like tear gas? And it was really beautiful the way that Palestinians reached out to the protesters in Ferguson, and that there is now, and has been for a long time, that Black Palestinian solidarity is not new. But we see it reaching new levels today, that people are really making the connections between Israeli oppression of Palestinians and Zionism and other forms of racism and white supremacy, and that we are really we are in need of a collective front, and to not exceptionalize these different issues, but really see them as part of a collective struggle for collective liberation, and because we are stronger together, because we want to fight for each other, but also because oftentimes it really is the same oppressor. A lot of these corporations that are profiting from Israel's occupation, corporations like Hewlett-Packard, which is providing the imaging for Israel's ID card system and racist checkpoints, and provides all kinds of other technology for Israeli prisons, etc., is the same corporation that is providing technology to U.S. prisons, aiding in ISIS deportations. These are the same corporations, and we can look at those connections, and we can see the connections between these different forms of oppression, not to somehow blend them as if they are exactly the same, but to notice that we do have these commonalities, and to build on them to ultimately win. I do want to mention the Hewlett-Packard as an example of one of the many campaigns for boycott, divestment, and sanctions that exist today. The boycott, divestment, sanctions, the acronym is BDS. The BDS call came from Palestinian civil society more than 10 years ago, and Palestinians basically said to the international community, if you cannot stop the billions coming from your government, such as ours, we have billions going to support Israel's aggression. Stop profiting from it yourselves and your complicity. And the tactics of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which are actually based on the anti-apartheid's utilization of those same tactics, have been extremely effective in bringing the question of ending our support for Israeli aggression against Palestinians to campuses, in campus boycott and divestment campaigns, campaigns to divest churches from Israeli apartheid, in the same way that these tactics were used to target with boycotts and divestment and sanctions apartheid South Africa in a very effective way. So people can really engage in this. It's not simply about learning what's happening, which of course is important. And if you want an intro, my book and DVD are out there. There's lots of other resources beyond my own. I really encourage people to go to our website, which is for the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. The acronym is uscpr.org. You can get updates, action alerts, lots. There's so many ways of getting involved. But BDS provides a very tangible, concrete way for people to see the ways in which we are complicit in what Israel's doing, to stop buying products that contribute to the oppression of Palestinians, and to really mount and pass effective resolutions and campaigns for boycotts and divestment based on the call that came from Palestinians themselves. And what's neat is to see the way that these tactics of boycotts and divestment are also being used by other struggles. So, for example, municipal divestment in places like Seattle, Washington, and Davis, California, from the North Dakota Access Pipeline. The Dakota Access Pipeline, in solidarity with Standing Rock and Indigenous struggle. So the tactics of divestment really being utilized also for climate justice, divestment from fossil fuels, boycotts. We saw the delete Uber trend, and we see boycotts being more and more utilized. And we have a lot to learn from one another, and really build on the successes of the Palestine movement in really, BDS, these tactics, these time-honored tactics that are nonviolent, of boycotts and divestment, have really become the greatest strategic threat to Israeli domination that there ever has been. And they're these beautiful tactics that have been used, with the Montgomery bus boycott, Gandhi, etc. And we see them playing out today from Palestine to the U.S. and beyond.
Well, I'm going to jump in. We got a little bit of a dialogue going in the chat here, and it says, but religion being the main cause is yet to be mentioned, and I disagree with that. I think religion is kind of the excuse. And also, you haven't really mentioned about the Refusniks, the Israelis who are opposed to Zionism, and they want something different. They don't like the system that they're living under now. So would you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So first of all, for the question of if this is a religious conflict, that I understand that is the common perception, but that's simply not the case. This is not a struggle around religion. This is a struggle around land, and it's very clear, being there and learning about it, that is a misperception that I think is propagated intentionally in order to make people feel like they can't fully understand it. For example, that it's something that's been going on for thousands of years. That's nonsense. Actually, Jews lived in the Middle East. Jews were less targeted within the Middle East than anywhere in the Western Hemisphere and in Europe. It is not the case that Palestinians are anti-Semitic inherently or anything like that. This is not about religion. This is about resources and land. Sorry, your second question, remind me.
Oh, it was just about the Refusniks and the Israelis themselves that are opposed to this apartheid state.
There are Israelis who refuse to serve in military. There are Israelis who support the boycott, divestment, sanctions call, who say boycott my country, including academics. So the part of the BDS call involves a boycott of academic and cultural institutions because they are part and parcel of Israel's oppressive regime. And there are many Israelis who are themselves supporting and leading these campaigns, but they are being targeted by Israel. There's recent legislation to really criminalize, to make lists of them, to target Israelis who support BDS, and of course targeting Palestinians themselves who are leaders of the BDS movement. One of the co-founders, Omar Barghouti, is at this very minute under a gag order and has been enduring more than a week of interrogations because of this repression. We see in the United States students who are leading campus divestment campaigns are being targeted and smeared, and we see at the federal and state and municipal levels of the U.S. government attempts to pass anti-BDS legislation. BDS, being an entirely constitutional form of resistance, is now being trying to be muzzled with this anti-free speech legislation. But it really just goes to show just how desperate the opposition has become, because they are no longer winning the court of public opinion. Anytime there is an actual vote, anytime anyone wakes up and learns about the issue, nobody can support what Israel's doing anymore. So they're resorting to these top-down draconian efforts because they cannot sustain the previous status quo anymore. So it really shows how effective this resistance has become, and that we really need to redouble our efforts. And I really encourage people to find out more. You can go to our website at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, uscpr.org. Sign up for action alerts. Look around, do some Googling. There's so much out there, and especially during this moment when we can see the parallels, that it's that just as Trump wants to expand the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, which we visited as our organization about 6 weeks ago, and it was horrifying to see the human impact of this wall that is separating mothers from their daughters, families from each other, seeing people who cannot even touch each other through the wall, trying to have a conversation and reconnect because of these racist policies that separate them. Not only is Trump building a wall, but Israel, it touts its walls that separate Palestinians from their resources and each other. Not only does Trump have a ban on refugees and a Muslim ban, but Israel's Muslim ban, Israel's ban of refugees goes back now almost 70 years to its initial exile of most of the indigenous population that it has since banned simply because they are Christian or Muslim. Just as the U.S. is building on stolen land of the Standing Rock tribe, so is Israel building on stolen land in Jerusalem with its settlements. That these are two regimes that are founded on racism, on Islamophobia, on white supremacy. They have a culture of repression to stifle the resistance that will continue. And we can see the connections that have always been there, and we can build together a united front against oppression and against racism and for things that we all believe in, like justice and equality and freedom for all people, regardless of their religion, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their gender identity, for everybody. Right on.
Anna, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I know you told us you only had a half hour, at the half-hour mark right now. Rob, is there anything else from chat that you should ask her?
No, I'm just kind of enthralled with everything that you're saying. But I know you did say Trump several times. And, the apartheid issue was not addressed during the Obama administration. So we can't just make it all sound like it was just coming from Trump. I mean, this has been going on. Jimmy Carter was, tried to do some peace talks between, both sides. But, this has been going on for a long, long time. So we can't just pin everything on Trump. And I would like you to...
That's a good point. I can end on that. There has been bipartisan support for Israel going back decades, and that Democrats and Republicans alike. Certainly Obama gave Israel more aid, if I have my numbers right, than any president before him. But I can say that. That Trump is, certainly, bringing the racism and white supremacy of this country it's sort of he's sort of emboldened it and allowed it to gain more power than ever before in my lifetime. But he's also given us an opportunity. It's making very clear these connections that were already there. We can no longer deny that this country that we live in was founded on white supremacy and continues to manifest that white supremacy every day. And we can no longer deny these obvious connections. And I hope that this moment, in all of its horrors, especially for targeted communities, also lets us see with some clarity what's happening and which side, and helps us pick which side we're on. And it's very clear that Trump and the Israeli regime and Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister, stand united. And so let us be clear where we stand, and let us work together for justice for all.
And to side with you on the Trump issue, I don't even know if we want to open this can of worms, but Jared Kushner, his ties to Israel are that's kind of scary to me, and I don't know.
Yeah,
if you want
his parents are developers of the settlements.
Anna, anything else? I hope we can have you back at some point, because this has been...
Yeah, I would love to have you back, because I really feel we just jammed everything in 30 minutes as much as we could, and it's so good to hear all of this stuff from your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. And there are many wonderful Palestinian speakers who can talk with even better clarity than my own about their own experience targeted by Israeli apartheid. So thank you for listening, and I hope that this can help people on their journey to understanding and taking action.
Thank you, Anna. You rock. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again. And now, Rachel, we're going to get back to the color tie report.
I'm blown away, Rob. I'm blown away. Anna just spoke so eloquently, and she jammed so much information in. She's like a professional debate person. I can't believe that. She should be a lawyer. She's great. She's great.
Yeah, I imagine if you go out on the circuit, you're going to have all kinds of people. You're going to encounter all kinds of people. If you go out to, to colleges to talk and that kind of stuff, you're going to have a lot of people really mad at you. So she's got a pretty thick skin. And
but the way she's able to keep talking, and she keeps talking, that's a gift.
It is.
It really is.
Well, it's a gift that, I don't know if you're familiar with Cliff Hyde at all, but He was talking about kind of this people that they're almost like schizophrenic, because at this proper time in history, they hear this voice that tells them, what needs to be said. And so they aren't schizophrenic. They're the people that become the shamans, the visionaries. And they aren't nice people, because they tell people what they don't want to hear, no matter how polite and nice they come across as. Everybody perceives them as a threat, because they're getting into our cushy way of life, and we don't like that. So but anyway, yeah.
Are you saying that's Anna?
Well, I would say so. I would say probably everybody that's in the room is somewhat that way. That all of a sudden we're hearing the winds of change, talking to us and telling us that, the stuff they're telling us on the news isn't right. Listen up, folks,
right.
And so, yeah, you've got it. I've got it.
Well,
certainly.
what she said about the difference of the traveling, all this stuff, the different labels you have to travel to certain places. Where I used to work at that defense contractor, the president of the company had 2 passports. One that he would use when he was going into Israel, and one he used when he go into Saudi Arabia.
Oh, wow. And
You're technically not supposed to have 2 passports, right?
Right.
But he had 2 passports, just specifically because if he used the one that said Saudi Arabia going into Israel, that had a stamp in it that said Saudi Arabia while he was going into Israel, he had all sorts of problems. And he was like, screw this, I'm getting another passport. And somehow he got himself one.
Well, if you have dual citizenship, does that also do you have a passport from each country that you are a citizen?
Yeah, he was
in?
an American. He was American.
Well, there are a lot of American and Israeli dual citizens, and
he wasn't. He was not a dual citizen.
Okay.
He just got himself 2 passports.
Well, that's convenient. I suppose if you got enough money, you can have anything.
You can have anything you want. So. Anyhow, but I loved having her on. It was very, very refreshing to hear her talk.
Yeah.
And we definitely got to have her on again.
And people who haven't seen this life in occupied Palestine, like I say, there's no screaming and bombing and nothing. It's just...
And she talks much slower, too. She talks much slower, and it's calm, and you're just like, wow, I never thought about that. And she shows pictures of Palestine, of what it's really like back there, and it's just like... I watched the whole thing last night. I was just kind of blown away.
Yeah, and I just saw, I mentioned before the show here that Lee Camp and Abby Martin have now addressed this issue, and Abby Martin actually went over there, and it's a great parallel. So let me see. We will put up the Color Tie Report music, and maybe we can...
Oh, you want to do that right now?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, if you're ready. Are you ready?
Of course. I'm always ready with a Tie Color Report. You kidding me?
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Shadow Citizen presents the Necktie Color Report. And now for this week's interpretation of the subliminal messaging in necktie color as shown in this week's photos distributed by the mainstream media.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Shadow Citizen Tie Color Report. This week I have 2 bombshells to report on. First is the emergence of the skinny tie. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has been spotted twice in the news sporting a tie inspired by the 1960s or 1980s. Seeing as the tie was not textured as woven, I'm going to assume this was a hat tip to the 1960s Men in Black Kennedy era. However, it could also be a sign that we're entering a big 80s redo. Jared was wearing a black skinny tie when his father-in-law, President Trump, announced the newly formed office. It was called the White House Office of American Innovation as a new thing, with Jared Kushner overseeing it. The office will leverage business ideas and potentially privatize some of the government's functions. Kushner says, "The government should be run like an American company. Our hope is that we can achieve success and the efficiencies for our customers, who are the citizens." Now, of course, the citizens are really more correctly positioned as the board members and the shareholders, but that was a nice thing to say on his way into the office. The black skinny tie works well here, as it's an obvious rejection of the 1970s inspired ties that have been all the rage during the Make America Great Again boomer mind screwery that's been going on. Black is drop dead serious. It also is much more flattering to Jared Kushner's slight frame. The other bombshell tie color development was President Trump signed the bill into law repealing all the Obama-era Environmental Protection Agency stuff. He was wearing a blue tie with white crisscrosses. This incorporated the horizontal stripes that he had been wearing on the blue ties when he was focused on calm communication and the intelligence community. This used horizontal stripes going both ways. This was very interesting to me as we hear about Harvard University announcing the launch of its geoengineering program this week, in which it will recreate volcanic ash plumes to alleviate global warming. Of course, these man-made ash plumes will also contain barium oxide and aluminum oxide. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the tie the president wore very much reminded me of chemtrails. Anyhow, that's my tie color report for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next week.
And that's a great, tie-in to our last, with Ben Davidson, and
oh my gosh, how could I forget that? That literally shook me up.
And then, he just had right after he did our interview, the very next day, he had a clip about, it was just him and some of the other, weather observers that were going, they're actually going to announce it. Before they've denied that there's any such a thing as chemtrails, but now they're going to announce that chemtrails, that the spraying is going to start. They aren't going to admit to having done it already. They're just going to say it's going to start. And then one of the other commenters go, now that the ice age is about ready to start, where temperatures are going to actually cool, they will be able to say, yeah, see, we started, spraying the chemtrails and we quit, with our successful program. We stopped the global warming. It's getting cooler. Don't you like that?
Right. Yeah, that was interesting. But that whole thing freaked me right out. Because they're talking about, and MIT, of course, which is right across, literally right next door to Harvard, they're pro this program. They think it's great. And the IPCC, which is that big international board that's about climate change, they're anti this. They think this is a bad thing. As does Ben Davidson, our guest. He thought this was a bad thing, that they should be spraying this stuff on us.
Well,
because, of course, he sees it more as the whole Earth change thing as more of a geomagnetic relationship between the sun and the Earth. And that's what, but I was blown away by what he was telling us about the magnetism problem on Earth and how the sun is calming down with its sunspots and everything and the rays that it's throwing at us. And it's making it so that the weather isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing at all.
And the sun has its own protective, magnetic, barrier, that keeps us safe from space radiation, and that is, minimizing also. And so the Earth's protective magnetic, field is becoming less and less. And he says, we're going to learn, what the great minds, discovered, that what was going on in space. That we've been living in kind of a rather sheltered 600, 800 years here, and so now as things change. But when I heard this thing about these guys taking credit for stopping global warming, I was reminded, of this parody site, Minnesotans for global warming. And nobody's going to like it if these guys stand up and say, see, it's colder now. We caused this. These guys are going to get tarred and feathered and burned at the stake, the whole works. So it'll be pretty funny. But
well, I mean, I'm not like ha funny, but it's going to be, I understand what you're talking about.
Well, to me, it's funny that these guys just are that clueless, that they won't realize what the heck's going on. So anyway, I also wanted to mention that, since this show is kind of about Palestine and the parallels, I mean, the other thing that's starting to hit the news cycle is, the national ID. And that's exactly, I mean, we didn't go into the different colored license plates. The Palestinians have, green license plates?
Yeah, that movie that she did up was so great. I watched it last night. I really think everybody should go to her website and find that movie and just click on it. It's really good.
Yeah.
Her website, what is it?
Anna in the Middle East. Yeah, Anna in
the Middle East. Very, very good.
Yeah, she did a great job. And she's, like I say, she could probably have a cushy job someplace else. And she's just somebody that's kind of heard the call and is out here spreading this. And yeah, I when I was trying to get her on my show, I saw pictures of her in the marches, in the protests, in Ferguson. So they were down there, and I think her grandmother was out there also. So maybe that's why she's doing it. She's kind of, her grandma's got the gene too that makes you a little bit more feisty and get out there and say, hey, this isn't right. Let's have peace and prosperity for everybody, not just a few at the very top who have learned how to implement this divide and conquer that that keep us fighting with each other about. So
right. Well, it was interesting too because Obama did sign the largest aid package to Israel ever, and then when Trump was coming in, he promised the Israelis that he would boost that even more. And interestingly, they're not going to call it. They're going to not call it humanitarian aid. They're going to call it something else, and it's really going to roll back into the contracts that the U.S. Defense contractors get. So there's going to be more money pumped out on top of what Obama promised, pumped out to the U.S. military contractors to build more stuff for Israel to protect itself. So, but on top of that thing that they're going to do, there's a provision that any countries that do not recognize the state of Israel, such as Malaysia, the U.S. will not trade with. That's not cool.
No, it's not cool, but there's lots of things that we should be paying attention to. I think they say one of the reasons that JFK was probably assassinated was that according to our treaties, that any country who has nuclear weapons that they haven't declared, we're not supposed to trade with them either, and
yeah, go ahead.
And so I mean, we should not be providing all this aid to Israel that we're doing, and I wish I would have prepared. And what
is it? Was it like 10 million a day that were given to? What is it? It's something crazy like that the U.S. is giving to Israel.
Yeah, I think it's much higher. It's a lot, and then we should start looking at how much it's costing each American citizen to support Israel, and what are we getting back for it? Because it's this latest fighter jet that is asphyxiating the pilots and everything, and we've just gave a bunch of them to Israel, and they've gone in and retooled them and made them work. So are they giving us that technology back? I mean, we're giving them the planes. Are they giving us the technology back? I bet you it's a one-way street on that one. So
no, I don't know about that. I think it's probably two-way, but especially if it's a fixed to U.S. contractor thing. They probably do have to talk to the contractor. It's not even through the U.S. government. Like she said, it's really important to know who these corporations are that you can boycott. Like who would have thought HP?
Yeah, the friendly company, and what was this Ortel guy? Talked about how GE is just and what was the GE imagination or whatever? I forgot. They had all those commercials.
Well, we bring good things to life. They try to make their catchphrases as open and uplifting as possible, so they can literally be doing anything. Like they make refrigerators, sure, but they also make this thing. Most of the stuff that they're making money off of at GE is weaponry.
Yeah.
So in fact, the company that I worked for, that I've written my books about, a lot of those divisions came from GE.
Yeah, and the company that I worked for, just making circuit boards, a lot of those circuit boards went to GE and went to their different medical divisions and their defense division, and so all sorts of stuff. And I say, it is.
And what Anna was talking about the Gaza Strip, I wanted to bust in, but she was on a roll. I didn't know where to really cut into her. Was the Gaza Strip? I follow Project Censored. And sometimes I actually buy the book. They put out a book each year. I think it was Project Censored 2009 or 2008. They had an essay about the natural gas that's in the water that is right on the shore of the Gaza Strip. And of course, they could have they could be completely out of any sort of financial problems if that deal had gone through. But then it got blocked. I think it was BP that blocked the deal.
Yeah, and every time, I mean, Gaza probably isn't going to last much longer. It is basically just a big pile of rubble at this point. They bombed the heck out of that place.
Yeah, because they want that. Like she said, it's about land and it's about
land and the resources under them.
And the resources, sure. And I do think that Gaza Strip is all about that gas that's underneath the water right there on their shoreline.
Yeah, about that, and it's also, I've heard that they already have plans to develop it into another, resort area. Also, that they will have. It'll be like a new Dubai or something like that, but it will be a Israeli, built thing. So
yeah,
it'll be.
I'm sure it's going to be gorgeous. I mean, they've got all the money in the world, right?
Yeah, so, we pay for it.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe that's where Obama and the Clintons and everybody else will be heading. So that's interesting. Oh shoot, I saw some more interesting stuff. That tied into our interview with Ortel. About the Clintons, and as soon as Hillary lost the Clintons, all of these countries that had been sending them money, into the Clinton Global Initiative, they canceled the checks the night that Hillary lost. It's so these.
Oh yeah, sure.
So that's why that foundation is now going away. It will be
right.
No longer.
And her Chelsea's husband, he had a hedge fund set up. It was all, and it instantly went belly up because nobody's going to invest in that thing if you don't have any sort of play with the new president, right?
Yeah, it was just a bribery, a way to funnel bribes, that these countries wanted to be able to bribe the politicians. And so it was a way to take money into the country that they could, bribe to get what they wanted, favorable trade status and the whole works. So,
well, the same, I just want to say, if you look at it, though, it's Trump being the president now is a natural progression of things because he used all of his ties to all sorts of businesses to get him to where he is today.
Right.
In this political thing, that's what happened.
Right, and it's amazing, how all of his kids are married to Jewish people with, direct ties to, influential families in Israel. So,
wait, all of his kids are?
Well, at least.
Or just Ivanka?
The son is also has a Jewish wife, and I forgot.
Did he convert?
I don't know if he's converted.
I
or
don't
not.
think so.
No,
probably not.
Because
it only really matters if the woman remains Jewish. Then her children are Jewish.
Oh, I see.
Because the lineage goes through the woman's side.
Okay. And me, I'm, we all know that I was a Catholic and I don't practice it anymore, but I just distrust all religions. I don't, well,
because it really does play, a lot on people's minds, I think. But people's spirituality is really important part of their life on the planet. I mean, it's not to be ignored. People, how they feel about their eternal self, that's not to be ignored.
Yeah, and if you give up on religion, it's usually for that very, reason, especially I've known a lot of, ex-Catholics, and they still, it's kind of like, they were not able to surrender their conscience in the confessional. They still wanted, they still felt bad about what was going on, and they wanted to be active, and they just, couldn't find what they were looking for in the church, so...
Right. Yeah, it's a personal journey. Let's just call it that. It's a personal journey.
It is.
So now I'm really excited because we've got. Guess who we have coming up next month?
We have Jack Blood coming up.
I got her. Joyce Riley of the Power Hour. We're going to be doing an interview with her, mostly to talk about how she got involved with broadcasting, how her life turned into that, and the journey that she took and the people that she talked to and what was the most outstanding things that she came across and things that she wants to impart on the next generation of DIY type of investigative journalists or people that want to talk to the world like Rob and I. What is her what could she give us as far as advice? So I'm really, really excited about that interview.
Yeah, I am too. I've listened to Joyce. I think I started probably in like 2004, and she's been a staple. And there are, I've listened to AJ all this time. I followed Jack Blood across, several networks. He's on next week, right?
No, Jack Blood's going to be on. Let's look.
Wait a second. No, next week is Tony Zamboni. We pre-recorded
next week
that.
Is Tony.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, we had a great interview, and Tony and I are buddies now. We're about the same age, and I think Tony's going to come over to Radio Confluence and do an open phone session roundtable where everybody can call in. And believe me, this guy can talk about everything. He's very technical. He's very smart.
Yeah, he's got the gift for the gab,
just like you. He's got the gift for the gab, and he's got math behind everything. He's done all of these things, so that will be a lot of fun. And I don't know if we'll get him.
So that's going to be on Wednesday the 5th. Tony will be with us talking 9/11 Truth. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is next week on Wednesday the 5th. And then on the 12th, we've got Stefan, and I don't even know how to say his last name, Verstefan?
Yeah, and I don't even know who this guy is. I haven't done my homework,
so
I'm going to have
that's
to start
great.
looking it up.
It's going to be awesome then. It's gonna be perfect. Now, this guy, he's done a lot of YouTubes that people that are in the quote-unquote liberty kind of movement, they've seen these YouTubes for about a decade now. And he's written books, and he wants to talk about his latest book. So that should be interesting. He's definitely of the mindset that people do not have to live in the matrix that they've set up for us. He's Canadian. And I just want to hear what he has to say. It should be good. And then on the 19th, we've got Jack Blood. And then on the 26th, Joyce Riley. So that'd be great.
Yeah. So we've got a great lineup of guests, and I don't know how you
do
it.
But then coming up even after that, in May, we're going to have Catherine Austin Fitz on May 3rd coming back to talk to us about local action. So after you've heard what she had to say before, she actually threw a webinar. And I listened to it. And I took notes, and I told her, I said, this was a great webinar. And she's like, can we talk about the local action we were talking about the webinar? I said, yeah. So we hooked her up. She's going to be back with us talking specifically about local actions you can do where you live to cleanse the money around you. Because so much of it is just, we've talked with her about black budgets and all this other stuff, how to get yourself, and if it's not going to work where you live, where to reposition yourself. She tells you how to look at a place on a map and drill into the place to find out if it's the type of place that will be hospitable to you as far as financially. Because things are really, she says, things within the next decade are really going to change. And in my mind, I'm saying shit, it's going to be shit hit the fan type of scenario. But she never said that. So, but nonetheless, she said we've got to really brace ourselves in the next 10 years. Money's going to be very different, and we've got to live in a place that we can prosper.
Yeah, make stuff work. Yeah, and
next week. Oh, go ahead.
Well, you've been on with Greg Hunter, right? Maybe I'm wrong with that.
On his show? No, I've never been on Greg Hunter's show. No.
Oh, okay. I thought that was something that I heard you say once, but anyway, I follow him pretty often, and a lot of his guests are saying that, look, this is it. The whole money scheme that was set up by the Federal Reserve is done because we don't have the trade goods. We aren't manufacturing the type of things that other countries want. All we're manufacturing is war stuff, and other countries
and healthcare.
And healthcare.
We got sick people and war stuff.
Who did you just mention that it was on James Evan Pilato was talking about the countries that are just completely rejecting our GMOs, that they don't want anything to do with them, and so
good.
And so we don't, and so if all you have are paper dollars, and the paper dollars don't have goods being produced that they can buy, with those paper dollars, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how many of them that they print, the people that have hoarded all of these, all of this money, it's not going to do them any good because,
well, on top of it, Rob, I was all involved with the Ron Paul thing, and I still love Ron Paul. So he's like a father figure. I love him. But I'm honestly starting to wonder, I think they let him continue with his messaging and everything, especially with the end the Fed stuff. Why didn't somebody just come out and pop him, like just get rid of him? No, they let him go on and on with this end the Fed stuff. And I think it's to get people in the mindset that it would be a glorious event when they do.
Yeah, I think so too, and I also think that they're going to try to, put the gold standard back in because, the people at the top have already hoarded the gold, and they will have ultimate, they've changed the golden rule to, who has the gold rules, and so we'll all be the serfs of these people that have hoarded all the gold in the time. And who
knows? Maybe the world will end before then, because on May 10th, we're going to have Ben Davidson back on to talk about the geomagnetic problems the Earth is having. So we'll be able to finish up with that. But Rob, thank you so much. This was a good show. I'm glad we had Anna on today.
Yeah, I wanted to get her on for a long, long time, and even on my show, that was one of the first guests I tried to get, and she was, had other stuff going on, and so, and that's fine. I'm glad that we were able to get through today, and we'll have to get her back on because I'm sure we can ask her to talk slower and give her the whole hour, because she had an appointment to be at today, so I think she tried to squeeze in as much as she could.
Yeah, I know she did. She tried to juice that lemon. Yeah, that was good.
Okay,
she did a really good job.
So let's see. Let's go out with our Ben tune and bring that in. And thanks everybody for listening. It's been fun.
Bye guys. Have a great day.
Welcome to Shadow Citizen with Rachel McIntosh and Rob O'Sell.